The rain found its way into everything, bleeding through brickwork, shaking the glass from broken windows, filling the empty can Christie put out for the rush hour. She ran her finger around its ragged lip, inviting blood, proof that she was still here. A Guinness can, its top taken off with a blunt knife, stones weighting the bottom. Coins did the same trick, but it had been days since anyone dropped coins. She sucked at her finger, tasting meat and copper. Raw inside, an empty ache, but I'm still here, she thought. She wished she had better proof than a bloody finger in her mouth. The world was a wall of umbrellas. She knew the commuters on this route, had seen them sweating in their summer dresses and shirt sleeves, scowling now, heads down, shoulders up, angry at her for taking up space on their pavement, sticking her dirty feet in the half-shut door of their conscience. The rain was an excuse to hate her more than they already did. When she was new to this game, how long ago? Months? She'd searched the crowd for kind faces, but she'd quickly learned it wasn't kindness that gave coin. People threw change at her the way they'd toss it at a toll gate basket, to get past, away. Soon they wouldn't have to pretend not to notice her. She'd be see-through. The rain was washing her away. "Do you mind?" a woman demanded, meaning Christie's feet, which were in her way apparently, even though they weren't. She'd made herself so small no part of her was in anyone's way. "For God's sake, find yourself somewhere to go." Thin and furious, her fist fierce with rings, clenched around the handle of a yellow umbrella. Christie had tucked herself into a doorway where it was almost dry, but the rain still found her, pricking through old bricks, a trickle and then a stream. She felt its fingers tickling her neck. "There are places, you know." She didn't know. She wished she did. She was scared of the rain, the way it ruined everything, her clothes, her sleeping bag, everything she had. Rain scared her worse than fire. When she was new to this, a young couple would come with leaflets. They'd stop and crouch, faces working hard, talking about our Lord and what was coming and "Are you ready?" Christie expected it from old people, though most shook their heads as if beggars hadn't existed back in their day. Only once did anyone over the age of 60 give her a second glance. The young couple had pamphlets with pictures of grinning people. The colours ran, making her hands dirtier. When she asked for money, they got mad. They pretended they weren't. "We're on your side." But she saw it under the surface of their skin, like a swallowing of snakes. Worse than the snakes was the little man who came and sat beside her. He never spoke, just sat dropping change into her can, 1 penny at a time, so she couldn't get up and go, or tell him to piss off even though he was freaking her out. He smelt funny. Not poor funny, rich funny. Being rich didn't help, the young couple said. It was about being ready for what was coming. Death or Jesus, she didn't know, but there was a whole moment when she thought she could do it, pretend to be religious, so they'd save her from this. Being nobody, nothing, invisible. When the rain started, they stopped coming. Everyone stopped except the little man, in a plastic cape that ran the wet off him into her doorway, splashing coppers into her can, and she knew she couldn't afford to be picky, but when he went, she shoved her hand in and scooped out his coins, flinging them away from her, sucking rusty blood from her knuckles. He'd be back for more tomorrow. She should move, somewhere he couldn't find her. Her whole body hurt like it was being squeezed. Where would she go? Who should she be? She could make herself smaller for the woman in the rings, pretend to believe in Jesus for the religious couple, go with the creep in the cape and be whatever he wanted her to be, just to get out of the rain for a day, an hour. It was washing her away, all her colours, everything. She wasn't her anymore, empty inside, scraped out, missing. That was when he found her, where he found her, right on the brink of being lost. He wasn't like the little man. He was tall and fair, and he smelt of the rain that was bluing the shoulders of his shirt. He didn't have pamphlets or questions. He wasn't angry with her. His hands were empty and open like his face. When he stood in her doorway, he blocked the umbrellas and the hiss and spit of tyres in the street. His shoulders stopped the rain from reaching her. Strong fingers, wet like hers, but his palms were dry and warm. Safe. He was safe. There are places, you know. She hadn't believed it. Until then. Tastes Like Fear is the third in the D.I. Marnie Rome series. which started with Someone Else's Skin. And it's about lost and lonely young people in London. So it's partly about homelessness and what it feels like to be on the streets and scared for your own safety and looking for safety. And it's about a man who finds these lost children and presents a place of safety or represents a feeling of safety to them. And then they start disappearing, and Marnie is hunting for one of these lost girls, and it's all about her investigation, her and Noah trying to find these girls, this family that's being created by this man who calls himself Harm and is both a saviour to these lost children, but also a great danger and a threat to them. I think Marnie has changed quite a bit since Someone Else's Skin. I was recently rereading it and surprised by how spiky and almost unpleasant she is in places, quite unlikable, it seemed to me now, although luckily readers did seem to like her, they saw something to like in her. I think the further away that she gets from the trauma that happened in her life, which was 5 years ago at the beginning of the series, and so we're a year on now in Tastes Like Fear, she's become both stronger but also softer at the same time. I think one of the ways in which she is stronger is that she's prepared to be vulnerable to the people that she feels that she can trust. So Noah, her partner that she works with on the case, and Ed, her partner in her private life. She's learning to trust people. She's reaching out a little bit more, and the thing that drives her need for answers from her foster brother Stephen, I think she's discovering that the answers are perhaps different to the ones that she thought she wanted, or maybe she needs to be asking different questions. So she's definitely changing, and I think this is a really interesting transitional part of the story in Tastes Like Fear, as we see her start to move away from that very protected, shut down, spiky person into somebody much more open and trusting, but also, of course, therefore much more vulnerable to being hurt or being challenged. For me, the best crime books are ones that are really steeped in the world, in the problems of the world, the worries of the world, hopes and fears, all of the things that all of us feel. It's about touch points, emotional touch points, I think, between the words that I'm writing and the words that the reader, that will move the reader, that will either scare them or give them hope or make them really question their own moral feelings about things and so the way society judges people and topics. So I always feel that you have to be really sort of knee and ankle deep in the world to write really thrilling crime books of the kind that I really enjoy writing and reading. So I think therefore it's my duty, if you like, as a writer to set the books within real cities. So this series is set inside London, and it tackles the sorts of issues that both Londoners and anybody really living in a city will understand. So how you can be in the middle of a huge body of people and yet be very alone. How the wealth and poverty gaps are very, very different, changing all the time, moving all the time, and how people can fall between those cracks and go unnoticed, how you can be lost in a place that is so teeming with people that you'd think that would be impossible, how the city can be both friendly and threatening at the same time. All of these things, I think, are really where excitement and thrills come from, for me as a reader of books, and also as a teller of stories. So I would never want to write a story that didn't have emotional impact for the here and now, and the worries of the world, if you like, and the compassion that people can find in surprising places, the flaws that we recognise that are in ourselves and in other people, but also the strengths, the things that we didn't know we were capable of doing, both good and bad. In terms of research, I must admit I love research. I think a lot of writers do. It's I have to make myself stop researching and start writing. Otherwise, I think I would be researching for 2 years quite happily before I started writing anything. So what I tend to do is I do an amount of research when I know what the theme is, and then I will write the story, and then I will retrofit the research to make sure I've got the facts right, because otherwise it's just too tempting and too distracting to go off and read fascinating textbooks and first-person accounts of all kinds of interesting things. So it's very important to me, research, and I love it, but I have to rein myself in a little bit, otherwise the what is essentially a work of fiction will never get completed, because it'll just be endless notebooks and textbooks. One thing that I found really fascinating that I discovered, though, when I was writing Tastes Like Fear, is the urban explorers. So these are people that will go down into the empty tunnels and subways underneath London. They will go up the top of the buildings that you're not supposed to go to the top of, like the Shard. They'll also go into derelict buildings that have been fenced off. And the big central set piece for Tastes Like Fear takes place in Battersea Power Station, which I've always been fascinated by. When I was living in London, I loved it. When it was an arts installation, I loved it. And now that they're torturing it into these new penthouse apartments, it's sad to see it sort of hobbled the way it is. But I found a fantastic website from urban explorers that had been up there when it was, covered in scaffolding and completely, they thought fenced off. And they went in and they got up on top of the chimneys at the height of the Millennium celebrations, and the fireworks were going off, and the chimneys were actually shaking. Apparently, they could feel the whole of the power station pulsing under them, and that was amazing to read their accounts of what it was like to scale up the sides of those chimneys. And they call it the Princess, the urban explorers. It's one of their big places that they, one of their favourite places to go and break into, I suppose, is the way you'd put it. Entirely illegally, of course, but it's showing us a part of London that most of us would never have access to otherwise. So that was really interesting, reading their accounts of doing that. I don't plot my books, and until recently I thought I was doing it wrong and had got lucky and got away with it. But in fact, lots of other people don't as well, so including Ian Rankin, so that made me feel a lot better. I think because I don't plot it, I think in some ways that's why it ends up being so very twisty, because I don't know what's going to happen when I start writing the book. I know roughly what the theme is, and I maybe have one really big twist in my head to begin with. And then I keep notebooks with lots of questions that I ask of the characters and the story and myself. And I'm lots of withheld answers. So I write to find out what the answers are. And I also, once the characters get going, let them drive the plot forward, so that I'm surprised when I'm writing by the things that they do. And then the great thing there is that I can't have possibly given things away by accident to the reader, because I didn't know what they were myself. So I think that helps. I'm surprised, therefore the reader is surprised.